And now, more Utalk. Now.
My name is Steve, and this is Utalk that you have found. And it's all about you talking to us. The show today is going to be extremely practical. You're going to walk away going, glad I did it. That was helpful. We've got a guy that is no stranger to Utalk that will be joining us in just a moment or so. Our guest is going to help us kind of sort through what is a new normal going to look like. I don't know about you, but I run across people all the time, and I'm kind of that way. It's like I'm anxious. I want to move forward to that epic day when we can get back to a normal life. Now, is that possible? How do we think through that transition into what is going to be a new normal? Because let's face it, we're not going back to what was normal. And how do we want our life to be? How do we want it to look like in this new normal? Dr. Josh Morgan is no stranger whatsoever. He's part of the Utalk crew, and he's an interesting guy. He's a data psychologist by day, and he is a trekker by night. He's an advocate for compassion and whole person mental health. And that's what I really like about having Dr. Josh as part of our crew. He's practical. It's not all this ethereal stuff and you walk away and your brain is hurting going, okay, what do I do now? And just to let you in on a little secret, he also has a blue dinosaur he travels with. There he is.
Since you mentioned him.
He's right there.
There you go.
He's your traveling companion, correct?
He's my traveling companion. I just booked my first post-pandemic, mid-pandemic, I don't know where in the pandemic we are, still in a public health emergency,
yes.
But my first flight in 2.5 weeks, and Blue will have to come with me, of course.
Oh, I love it. How can people kind of follow Blue and you?
Yeah, well, there's the priorities, right? I think I need to make Blue his own social media handle. But I'm here on Instagram at Dr. Josh M, Twitter at Dr. Josh, and LinkedIn at, I think it's Dr. Josh M also.
Oh, so pretty easy. We'll come back to that again.
I got it fairly easy, yeah.
Pretty easy to follow you and find you. Okay, now I'm going to digress for just a moment because I mean we got into Blue, we got into the trekker stuff. I won't ask you if you have trekker undergarments because we've asked that before, so we don't need to revisit that. But I was, when I was kind of putting together the beat sheet for this, I thought, I wonder what Dr. Josh would be like as a superhero. So here's the question. If you could have any superhero power, what power would you have? Why? And how would you use it?
How would I use it? Wow.
Yes.
There are so many really cool superpowers. It's actually reminding me, I did a presentation, interviewed a friend and colleague of mine about a month ago for our SaaS Global Forum. And she actually said that data is her superpower. And I was like, you know what? Working for a data company, I may have to steal that. But that just doesn't feel exciting. I mean, it's exciting in my own nerdy world. It really is.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
So to answer it in more of a traditional way, I guess, I've always wanted to fly. And at the same time, as we were talking about travel, I'm wondering, I think teleportation could be really helpful. To be able to, be able to visit more places faster with Southern California traffic, be able to just bypass all of that. And then, maybe if I was creative and risky enough, you could functionally fly by teleport yourself into the sky and coast and then just teleport to the next spot and coast. So I get that in there too. How's that?
Okay.
Is that a good answer?
Right. But see, you've told us a little bit about why and the power you want, but how would would you use it to help others? Could you grab somebody and teleport them with you?
You know what? I think that would have to be a requirement of the teleportation skill is that I could take people with me. Absolutely. I think that could be useful on a whole lot of fronts. Yes.
I can just envision it now because our audience probably doesn't know this. I mean, you do webinars and you do, all these teaching things. I think that's where you and I first met and then realized we had all these connections. So I can envision it now that you would be doing teleporting webinars and Zoom calls. And
Cool. I Zoom right there.
That's absolutely. Okay. Are there some, when we're thinking about transitioning and the anxiousness that so many people have regarding, are we post, pre, in the middle of the pandemic? And I almost hesitate to look at news feeds I get anymore. It's now I looked at something earlier today and it's like now the travel restrictions going to Mexico and Canada are going to be extended into, another month from now. All these and a couple new variants and mask requirements, some places and in some situations. And I know for me, that's kind of confusing, mask or not mask, depending upon where you're going. But are there some tips maybe that you could give us that, how do we determine what kind of life we want in this new normal?
Yeah. I think there's two parts to that question, actually, Steve. I almost want to talk about that second half first of the new normal. Okay. A lot of people are talking about that or get back to normal. This gets to many of our conversations of what is normal. Really?
Well, I'm not. So,
right.
We can leave that on.
I'll affirm that. But really, to our point here, who is really normal? We all have abnormality. Depending on our definitions there.
Sure.
I think what we really get used to is more of what we often call the status quo, just things as are familiar and usual. If we really think about it, in contrast to how you so lovely introduced me, to be a little philosophical at the moment, everything is always changing. Even the things of day-to-day life that, this is my normal. That may be your routine. That may be your status quo. But is it really not changing? Or are there changes? Now, in the midst of a public health emergency and a pandemic, a lot of changes have been forced upon us suddenly. And even as restrictions lift, many of those have felt very rapid also. So it's, I would say, kind of an acceleration, speeding up a change to what we have experienced. But I would use this as a way, one of my reflections personally too, as we move out of a public health emergency, as we look at what a new normal would be, is day to day, there is always a new normal. Moment to moment, there really can even be a new normal for us.
Sure.
Can we be more aware of changes, be able to be more adaptable to that? And what can it teach us? Which I think then gets to that first part of your question is, what can we do about that? I think one of the big challenges many of us have, and it's human nature, is we really get attached very strongly to our routines. This is because it's comfortable, right?
Sure.
It's what we know. Who doesn't want
it's safe?
100%. We want to be safe. We want to be comfortable. Yes, all of us do. And I think COVID has really taught us that many things are not as safe and comfortable as we thought they were.
Oh,
I don't think that's a bad thing to be more aware of.
No, I don't. I would agree with you. I don't think it is at all. And I think we need to, you mentioned status quo. It's so easy just to get into that routine. Yeah. Just keep doing the same thing, same place, same, and that's not necessarily the best way to live.
And on the other side, talking out of both sides of my mouth in some ways, routines are very beneficial. With my psychologist hat on and being able to give us a lot of psychological resiliency and be able to cope with anxiety, depression, go down those. Routines are very, very powerful. But if we get too stuck in it has to be this way, when life throws us a curveball, which it will do, that is just the definition.
Right? One or two or three every day.
As we're talking about, that's exactly right. Can we adapt? And I think a powerful lesson from all of this for the past year is we have all adapted. Whether we've wanted to or not, some of us have done it kicking and screaming, but we've adapted. that is a very, I think, powerful, hopeful lesson that even when our discomfort arises, to remember we were able to adapt, even if it was uncomfortable.
I like
that. That can
that.
lead to growth.
Yeah, I was just going to say that because to me, that's how we start to grow.
Yeah.
Okay, we didn't like it necessarily. It wasn't best case scenario, but we made it through, and there were huge changes. I mean, let's face it, not little kind of ones that add up, although there were those too, but these huge, ginormous changes, but we survived. We've had some struggles, some more than others. You and I have talked about this, anxiety, unfortunately, abuse in the home, suicidal thoughts, and, all those kinds of things. But I like the idea of seeing it as growth, that we can grow, we can improve on this journey of learning, really. And you and I have had this conversation. You know me well. I am one of those that wants to constantly be learning. I'm always asking you questions and sending you a note or something in text, and you're coming back and you're gracious, going, "Oh, great, not another question from this guy." But no, seriously, it's we should constantly be learning. As in my opinion, as long as we have breath,
yes,
and we can comprehend, because there's so much to learn.
Absolutely. About ourselves, about the world, about each other. And I think that's something just for my own sake too, being a psychologist, I'm trained in trying to listen, although it may not always sound like that as I can talk a lot, as you well know, Steve, too. But being able to learn and be curious about each other, about ourselves, et cetera. And yet, in the midst of a public health emergency like we've got here, it has raised my awareness of even the amount of, in some ways, lack of compassion and empathy and awareness of struggles of others that were blind spots. That's a good thing, I would say, in being able to be aware. A good example, you're bringing up masks. I mean, we're talking about that with the Delta variant popping up more, and should we, shouldn't we? I have two little kids at home, as you know, who aren't eligible for a vaccine. We're wearing masks, period, even though I'm fully vaccinated, because it's just safer. I don't want to unintentionally bring something home to them. It's more about them. And that's part of the thinking, I think, here, is it's helping us also go, can I do something? Can I sacrifice some comfort? A piece of cloth over my face is sacrificing some comfort for someone else. Especially now that I'm vaccinated, it's really more for others.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
We're talking about this now in the midst of COVID. At the start of it, when we were like, is this an issue? Is it not? I'll be honest, I kind of dismissed it. I'm like, it's there's all these things going around, just like many people, but I'll own it. I did take it as seriously as some of my colleagues, as my employers did, actually. Thinking, well, the flu is like this.
Yeah.
But then in the last several months, I've also been reflecting back and going, well, yeah, the flu is like this. Maybe we should actually take the flu more serious. Maybe, rather than saying we should treat it like the flu, maybe we haven't treated the flu well.
Yeah, exactly.
If when I have the flu, if I put on a mask, heaven forbid, what's wrong? And that, I think, is also a piece of this, is maybe that's part of the new normal, is going, you know what? I'm going to think outside myself a bit more. I'm going to pay attention to things that I just thought were routine. And hundreds of thousands of people get sick and die every year of the flu. Oh, well, that's part of life. Maybe it's not.
No,
maybe we can do more. I mean, I got my flu shots, but maybe there's more that I could have done. And we could even reduce those tragedies. I think we should be having those conversations as well.
Oh, see, I love that, because at Utalk, we're really big about being the change and making a difference. And, and I like this element we need to add in that you've been referring to over and over again about learning and growth. I mean, go back to the mask for a moment. Here's a weird thing, a good weird thing that happened to me. My doctor said, hey, need to start exercising more, lose some weight, that kind of stuff. And so here we are in the middle of the pandemic, and we're being told to wear a mask even outside. So I'm wearing this mask, and I'm jogging up the horse trails, at the bottom of the mountains where I live, and coming back. And then I went back to, have a subsequent checkup. And my doctor's going, "Whoa, Steve, what have you been doing?" He goes, "Your lungs are huge. You've got huge breathing capacity, And I said, "Well, Doc, I've been doing." He goes, "Now, you really don't need to wear a mask when you're jogging." He said, because you can see somebody coming at you, when you're going up the hill, they're coming down. You can move out of the way. But he said, "I'm not going to tell you not to." Because he said, what you're doing is improving your lung capacity. And he said, it's almost as if you're training to be running in a higher elevation. And I thought, I like it. Now I got to admit, with this heat wave, I'm out of sync with that, but I'm seriously thinking, when I start in again, I might just wear it periodically, because if it's having a positive effect on my body, if my lungs have more air capacity, I'm growing. So I guess we're talking about attitude too.
I think it is, and how we frame it, and thinking more broadly. I mean, you're using the term learning. That's part of it. A term that keeps popping up to me too is curiosity. Continuing to think. I think it's all these things that we're talking about. Think outside the box. Sometimes we get the public dialogue is so focused on, should we force people to wear a mask? Should we not force people to wear a mask? I shouldn't be able to, what about these other benefits? Let's pause that dialogue for a moment. And to your point, you were doing it to protect yourself and protect others. And you know what? There was an unintended consequence that was better for you.
Yes,
and,
it was
and the
positive.
Other thing, and maybe it's worth doing. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Is there a benefit? Yes.
Yeah.
And then you weigh that. And that, I think, is a big piece of this conversation too, in how we move forward and how we adapt to change, is being aware for ourselves, right? What are the consequences and benefits to us and according to our values? If there's a benefit of, for me, being able to protect my kids, being able to protect other people I may encounter from anything I may bring, aligns with my values, we all need to look at those values. The other part that I like that you're talking about here is you're also educating yourself, talking to your personal physician in your personal context.
Yes.
That is a good way to do it. I was just reading an article about a physician who's been on the front lines in one of the states that has very low vaccination rates. And she's like, "Why haven't you gotten the vaccine? Did you talk to your personal physician about this?" And every single person said, "No, I never even thought about asking that person." There's good reasons not to.
Yes.
And there's a lot of really bad reasons not to.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Having an educated conversation with a physician as a consultant, in this case, for your context, that's valuable. And that's a good lesson for us, I think, in general in life. Because as Americans in particular, we don't do a great job of proactively, I think, talking to healthcare providers about what really is best for me, until there's a problem and now we're reactive. And then it's too late.
I was going to say, and then it is too late, and I always kind of back talk to my physician, my doctor, at times, because he'll say, "Well, you need to," I'll say, "You know what, Doc, you're the quarterback." Okay. Now I'm not, he knows I'm not a big one on wanting to take drugs or, this kind of thing. But when you listen to him, you can improve. And I know there was at one point, he wanted me to take medication because I was overweight. And I said, "Doc, and he goes, "Well, you got another choice, and it's either meds or exercise." And he said, "I want you to come back in a month." And he went, "Whoa, you took me seriously." I said, "Well, you're the quarterback, and I think we have to develop that attitude of learning and listening. And in the midst of this, are there things that we really need to consider that maybe they were part of our old normal, we'll call it that. Are there things that we need to be willing to say, I need to leave those behind, or I need to rebuild them, or I need to be open to thinking outside the box." I love that terminology, and exploring maybe a new path or something different. Does that come back to attitude? What are we talking about with that?
There's that in itself could be a very long conversation, I think. And it varies. I'd go back to a couple of principles that we've been touching on is what are our values individually and collectively? I think a big lesson is a reflection on our culture and society, especially, talking about the United States. We have this tendency towards being very individualistic and it's great strength in many ways.
Yeah.
You cannot get through a public health emergency and a pandemic like this in an individual way. Period. You can't. It is about us doing things together. And when we don't, that's when you get the spikes in infections.
Yes.
So to me, I think that is a fundamental difference is we have to start thinking. It doesn't mean we throw away the individuality, and our personal responsibility and, my choices and everything. I mean, your example about your physician too, of here's your choices, meds or exercise, right? If you want to live, if you don't want to live, do what you want, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But therein lies the thing. What is your goal? What are your values? What are your choices, right? And how do they impact other people? I think that's a piece that we probably need to be a bit more intentional about asking and really thinking about. Of maybe it doesn't impact me, but will it impact someone else? We can start extending this to other major issues. Talk about global warming and the environment. Does it make a difference to me personally? Not necessarily. Will it for my kids, my grandkids, for people in another part of the world? Yeah, it might. Is that valuable? I think that's a reflective question we need to ask ourselves. What aligns with my values? What do I care about? Am I willing to sacrifice things and make myself uncomfortable for someone else?
For the community, for the greater good, for our society. And you can bring that back down to a smaller scale, family, friends.
100%.
And all of our socializing really has kind of gone out the window almost, and onto a screen.
Yeah.
Because so many people, I hear it over and over again. I'm tired of Zoom. I'm tired of having these Zoom classes. And I had a chance to do some really fun stuff at the end of this last semester, being invited into schools to do a Zoom call, but it was playing my drums, because typically I could go into schools and do assemblies and all. I couldn't because of COVID, but I could via Zoom. And all of a sudden, as teachers were telling me, and administrators, Zoom has taken on just a whole new look to it because of you. And it's not that I'm any big deal. It's, oh man, you were inspiring, you were encouraging. It was fun. It was different, but it was something that was helping others. And I really like, you've been emphasizing values, and I think we need to have the time, make the time, take the time, because let's face it, it's my problem as much as anybody else's. That little screen I have in my hand, it can consume me, especially because I'm almost like a news junkie, and I want to learn, I want to see, I want to gather. You know me, and that's the way I am. And I'm finding myself more and more turning my phone upside down, so I can't see the screen. Turning, the reminders and notifications off, so I can think. And being a musician too, I love music. I get in the car and I make sure music is happening before I even start it, and okay, now we're ready to go. I can start the car and I can get going.
Yeah.
But I'm finding myself too intentionally turning it off for periods of time.
I love these two examples because you're not saying it's one or the other.
No.
You still appreciate and value and, dare I say, enjoy reading the news, right? It's you know that there is value in knowing what's going on in the world. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing. You still love music. You find value in that. And you're also finding value in respite from these. And sometimes by taking a break from it, when we come back, we value it more. Going to, as you mentioned, socialization, relationships. Even the relationship with your physician, right? That is a relationship. There is a trust there. Yes. And that's something I think we also need to be talking about, is not just interactions at a superficial level. There's a deeper relationship. And as we've had a break from relationships, when we come back to them, hopefully we value them and see them in a different way. We may not engage the way we did before. And the other piece that I really want to highlight that you said is, I think you'd use the word reflect by, taking a moment to pause and to think from news, from music, whatever it may be, from stimulations, from whatever it could be. That's something I hope, as kind of a practical piece of advice, as we re-enter into whatever life may be and whatever life I want myself to have too, because it may not be what it was before. I actually, as I reflect, I don't like some of the things I used to be able to do before.
Sure.
I don't miss it, actually.
Yeah.
There's things I really like about the quiet in the midst of a pandemic, if I'm being honest. But therein lies, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be able to self-reflect. And if I can recognize, you know what, doing this situation is making me particularly anxious. Now, is that anxiety because it really isn't a good fit for me? Or is it because, to our point before, it's making me uncomfortable and it's pushing me outside of my zone? It can be a combination. These are not black and white things. But if we can be more self-aware and have that opportunity to self-reflect, we can get ourselves into the place where there's kind of what we call a form of stress that helps us grow versus the form of stress that shuts us down.
Interesting.
We don't want the shutting down stress.
No,
we want enough stress that makes you perform really well. Performing on tests, performing, I'm doing theater and things. People, performing in sports. You actually need stress to do that. And that can help you grow and perform well. You can push yourself too far or avoid if we are not self-aware enough.
Oh, I like it. I like it because I'm a big one on pushing myself, pushing through. I don't get sick a lot. And when I do, I don't like to be down. And I have a tendency to push through maybe too much.
Yeah.
But being self-aware, but that means that we have to have some reflective time. And again, I'm not in any way, I'm not going to sit here and bash social. And I mean, social media is great. We have an opportunity to be in contact with people we can't see all the time, meet people. It's just, I think it's a great tool, but I also think we need to turn it off at times. And with music, I'm the guy, since I'm a drummer, I'm the guy driving down the street, playing drums on the dashboard. And but sometimes it's good to just turn it off and just be still. And that's something I think we really desperately need to do in our culture. Learn, be aware enough. You're talking about self-aware and value. I guess I want to come back to that word, value that reflective time, value that time because that also helps you know who you are. I mean, let's face it, we struggle with who am I? And instead of letting somebody else define us or social media define us or whatever, who am I at my core? Do I value that? Where do I belong? Maybe as a result of the pandemic, we need to reevaluate. Maybe some of the relationships we've had, maybe are not the healthiest for us. And maybe we need to find some new ones. I think that whole thing of valuing and do I have a purpose? Can I make a difference somehow, some way, whether it's in an individual's life, a younger brother, older sister, parents, coach, friend, teammate, whatever it happens to be. But I'm not sure we value people, situations, and things like we should. I love you bringing that out.
And it's hard to do.
Yes.
And if we're not self-aware enough, we won't know how hard it is also. And then you're right, we go to one of the extremes of either we push through and ignore the discomfort, which is using our physical bodies as an example. You push too hard, you strain a muscle, you break a bone, bad stuff happens.
Exactly.
And on the other side of it, we avoid and we don't push hard enough and we don't grow. And you lose muscle mass.
Exactly.
Right? Both are bad. There's a happy medium in there where we want to be able to continue to push, maybe have some discomfort, but not so much that it strains us ultimately. It's a fine line.
It is. It really is. And I like what you're saying because we have to be willing to deal with some discomfort because everything can't always be, everything's fine. I don't have to push myself. Because if you're going to get any place, you know this through the educational process. I know that. You know this as an educator. I do as well. You have to push yourself sometimes. Physically, when you start lifting weights, you start doing a punching bag, jogging, whatever it is that you enjoy doing, you got to push yourself, because just sitting back and just kicking it all the time, it isn't going to help you. And you can be an inspiration and an encouragement to others. How can we, again, I come back to this thing about, with us at Utalk, about wanting to encourage people to make a difference and be the difference. Is there something, I mean, I know there's many things, but is there something we can do to help others as we all embark on this epic journey of finding another normal?
Yeah. I think that there's a couple of fronts, and it's a lot of the themes that we have been talking about already tonight. One, being self-aware and being able to say, this is what I need and this is what I can't do. Being able to set boundaries and advocate for ourselves also models for others that it's okay to be able to say no or to be able to do something else.
That's huge.
I mean, everybody has been forced, for instance, into isolation. I use it in quotes because it's not entirely true, because of technology. We're less isolated than people were with the Spanish flu 100 years ago, right?
Yes,
we have a lot more opportunities and benefits, plus teleportation, right?
Of course. The new superpower.
And there are many of us who don't necessarily want to be in big groups like things were, who don't want to go back to workplaces as they were before. And people have found that, doing things a different way really works better. And I need to be able to be aware of that and express that. The next piece of that in the helping others is, one, we've modeled that being able to say something about ourselves and our needs is acceptable and good.
Yes.
And I think the other aspect of it is, when we are self-aware, we can also be a little bit more in tune with observing others' needs, and then being able to call out and say, do you need to take a break? Do you need to go out this way? And being able to help them be able to advocate for their needs. That can take a whole lot of different forms, of course, in a wide range. But there are many environments where we may not speak up for ourselves, and we need somebody to be there with us and walk with us. And if we're not in tune to each other and we're only just self-involved, we won't have that. Many of us can probably imagine a time when we've had somebody walk with us through something hard, and when we haven't. And it makes a big, big difference. You don't have to be a specialist for any of that.
No. And what comes to my mind just right away is bullying.
Absolutely.
To have, and let's face it, bullying hasn't stopped, because we've spent a lot of time on screens and all, but this has been just a rich conversation. Is there a place where you can recommend people can go to get some resources that would cause them to think, like we've been talking about, with values and being self-aware and having compassion for others and advocating? Any places you can point us to?
There's a few resources. One who I've really liked, I think I've shared some resources with you, is the Greater Good Science Center. It's actually based in my alma mater at UC Berkeley. They have a really nice balance of based in firm science and making things very practical for general audiences in the realm of compassion, empathy, self-awareness, mindfulness, all of these principles we're talking about. I love everything that they publish and share, and I find it very, very accessible. So that's one. For other kinds of resources, especially in the behavioral health realm, one would be NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health at our federal level.
Okay,
they provide a wide range of very good resources to help educate us, one, about mental health conditions, but they also have resources, especially now in the midst of a pandemic, about how do we cope with that. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a mental health condition to get resources from NIMH.
Sure.
It's also about prevention, and they've got some great resources there.
Awesome.
Similar, I'll throw one more out, is NAMI, N-A-M-I, the National Association for Mental Illness. I think I have that acronym right.
Yes,
but they're also do a lot of advocacy in the community, especially from a family member perspective around behavioral health conditions and resources. So all of those slightly different perspectives, but can give very useful, practical, and link to additional opportunities.
Awesome. We'll make sure that we put all those up. And in fact, the Greater Good Science, you sent me that article, and I went ahead and signed up to get future articles because I thought this is good. This, it's practical. It's I don't have to be a data psychologist to make sense out of it. I don't have to be texting you, Dr. Josh, what do they mean? What do they mean? What do they mean? I can actually figure it out for myself. One more time, how do we follow you on social?
On Instagram, I'm at Dr. Josh M. Twitter, I'm at Dr. Josh. And LinkedIn, I think it's also Dr. Josh M.
All we have to do is remember Dr. Josh or Dr. Josh M. So we'll also have those as well. Thank you. Great to be with you as always. Thanks for making time.
Thanks for having me.
And for making this so practical. And we'll do this again. Appreciate you very much. And we'll look forward to having you again.
Thanks so much.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Sounds
Thanks.
great.
This is Utalk Radio.